Welcome to the TLR Podcast. I'm Tim.
I'm Janae.
And this is our first episode. Super excited. So, TLR is the acronym. It stands for Truth, Love, and Reason. What do you feel like is the breakdown of how we got to where we got and why this podcast is valuable?
I think that, especially speaking on the reason, the R in TLR, I think me coming from an apologetics journey and background, I see that reason matters in a conversation, like reasoning with people, being able to articulate what you think and making sure that it's clear, and also having good conduct in the conversation, which is where the love comes from. It's like whether you're debating with somebody or disagreeing with somebody, it's like you want to keep love in the combo and not get disrespectful or start treating a person differently. And then truth is you just want to always present truthful information or present yourself truthfully or be honest about the content of the conversation and be able to admit if someone is presenting a good reason or good evidence, and like just as long as the conversation is rooted in truth. So I think that's how both of us operate.
Right.
Just as long as we've known each other, we've operated like that, where we have those things at our foundation. And so I think that's kind of where that's where this idea comes from.
That's interesting. It's funny that you chose to do it backwards, because I feel like I actually think of it the exact.
Of course, I'm gonna start backwards because the reason. So
right.
Yeah.
But I'm like, for real, because like from my perspective, I'm thinking like, for me, especially after the conversations we've had, like my biggest thing has been realizing that like my faith hasn't been about truth as much as I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's like my thing is, it's like, I always use that analogy, the 5x5 analogy or whatever. And it's like, you know, if you don't know the answer, it's one thing for a bunch of kids to not know the answer. It's a whole nother thing for one of the kids to say there's not an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Like 5x5 doesn't have an answer. Like there's no such thing as truth. Is a completely different question than thinking you have the right answer. And
right.
So like, I think for me, that's what it is with Christianity, with talking to other religions, is like Christianity has just been right, and to not be Christian has been wrong. And it's like, because those are the default settings, it's like there's people in both of these camps that aren't really wondering if what I believe is true. It's that,
mm-hmm.
yeah, it almost becomes a moral issue before it becomes a math issue. And I think that's where, like, in my mind, I think this is gone. So I don't know. Truth for me is definitely like that bedrock. There has to actually be an answer to questions. We might not know them, but to say they don't exist is the problem. And then there's reason. Then there's showing your work. There's 5x5 is 27 for me and 25 for you. It's like, if you're not going to show your work, if you're not going to give a reason, how do you expect to convince me? And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is sometimes, especially in my past, I've evangelized to somebody saying like, Jesus died on the cross 2,000 years ago. You should believe in him to be saved. And they're just like, dead people don't get up. And I'm just like, well, once your heart is open. And to me, that's the same as saying like, 5x5 is 25. My math teacher told me, if you don't think that, you're wrong. And the kid says, my dad told me it's 27. And then they just walk off. It's like, because the other person didn't show their work, the other person gets to walk off thinking whatever they think. And it's like, I don't know, being right and being reasonable aren't the same thing. And I think realizing that has been big for me. So the R obviously has a big role. And then love. I think love is the most important thing, but it depends on the other two things. I remember hearing about like a drill sergeant or something like that who was over like EOD, which is like explosive. So the guy that actually has to cut the red wire and save everyone in the building.
Oh my God, like in Rush Hour.
Right. Wait, which Rush Hour?
First one with the C4.
Bang. Yes, that one. Yep. That's his job. And so basically, but his job as the drill sergeant or instructor is to train and weed out the people as they come through, so that, you know, whoever goes out there actually knows how to do their job. And so that's what he would always do, is he's cussing, he's calling you outside your name, he's degrading you, he's just making it his point but he's a Christian. And so it was like, somebody was like, dude, how are you like basically displaying all these characteristics and calling yourself a Christ follower? And like, his answer is like, because everybody who gets by me and dies is my fault. Like, because they weren't prepared to go out there in a place that will unravel you.
Exactly.
That people are going to depend on you, that you are going to need to be under pressure, and you're going to think, I can't do this. Like, you have to be able to combat that. If the first time you're combating that is in a real situation, you're going to cost someone their life. And so you go from thinking this is a very cold and jaded man to thinking like, dude, he is definitely motivated by some kind of love. Like, and it's like, but if you watch that on the outside, you don't know. But his reason and the truth of the fact that they are taking bombs apart matters. And then it's like, on the other end, it's like there's a guy who gives charity to everybody. And then you ask why he does it. And he says, oh, because ladies love a man that is generous. And it's like, all of a sudden, not as attractive anymore. And so I just think that's like, that's important. As important as love is, it's the thing that depends completely on truth and reason. And so anyway, that's how we got the letters. So
and I think something to like tie it all the way down to like our faith when it comes to just where is this relevant, or where do we see this at, like just within Christianity, like going back to the source being Jesus. It's like, okay, Jesus always emphasizes that as far as the motive and the intention and the heart, which we've talked about so many times, where it's just like he cared about not the action. Like, I think he really made that distinction between like, what's that thing he said where he was like, oh, talking to the Pharisees, like, you guys are like whitewashed tombs.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like exactly what you're talking about. It's like the person giving to charity versus the sergeant that's seeming to be a jerk. Right. It's like you could look at the guy giving to charity and look at the sergeant yelling at everybody, and you would be like, he's a mean man, and this guy is just so generous. But if his reason, his motive, his heart on the inside is like his reason, the R, you know, it's like they are actually doing whatever the action is that they're doing for two different reasons. We see that Jesus is always emphasizing the circumcision of the heart, like on the inside, like not the circumcision of the outer body part.
Yeah. Like the invisible is what's being judged, not the visible. Like that's essentially what
because your intention, your motive is not something that is seen. We call it your heart and your mind, but it's like, it's not. Yeah. That's not visible.
That's that's actually true, because this is true of my testimony, and you be getting on my head about this. But it's like, if I had made this podcast if I had just been judged and I had made a podcast before this 10 years ago, 5 years ago or something, it might have been called PLR, like perception, love, and reason.
I can't.
It's like, because for real, it's like I've been motivated by how things are perceived by people to look. It's like whether or not I do a deed wasn't as important as if people thought I was doing something. And it's like, that's so huge though, because it's like, I think that's why like 80% of Christians are scared of that Matthew verse of like, did we not cast demons out in your name? Did we not do this? Did we not do that? And he's like, depart from me, I never knew you. It's like, that's scary if you don't know what you're being graded by. Like, it's like, dang. Like,
no, what's funny is they brought up works.
Yeah.
They said, didn't I do?
Right.
The do was the issue in that sentence.
Yeah. No, seriously. It's like, oh, like that's just so funny to me to think like, we have to think of works the same way, like we almost think of like beauty. It's like, you know, it's like, it's cool, it's nice, but that's not what matters. Like character matters, you know? And it's just like to think, oh, didn't I do my hair? Didn't I put makeup on? Didn't I? And it's like, did you love the kids? Did you?
Right.
Or it's like, oh, well, that matters. They're same for
like,
guys,
did you ask them how their day was? Did you? It's like, didn't I put a roof over your head?
Yeah.
Didn't I?
For the guy, right?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, but did we have conversation? How was our communication? Did you remember my birthday? I mean, like, yeah.
I think the transition for me from just the perception to the heart or works to motivation, just whatever that leap is, it's so hard to go back to. It's like thinking back in high school about like, man, I used to be on the phone with hours with my girlfriend or my friends. And it's like, for the life of me, I know we talked for hours, but I cannot think of what we were talking about.
What did we talk about?
At 14 years old on the phone under the covers. It's
hours.
That we really thought mattered. That we made best friends or lost friends over.
Right.
Like, those things, well, honestly, I'm acting like I was a girl. I wasn't under the cover. But still, I'm like, even with dudes, it's like,
Is that a blanket with your flashlight?
Shh, but no, like, for real, I'm just like, what was on our minds at that age that we thought was so important? And when you think back as an adult, nothing registers. It's like, that's what I feel like. I'm like, what have I been operating under this entire time that I thought mattered?
Yeah.
If this is the only thing that's important. And it's like, it's just a funny thought because, yeah, for me, that's I don't know. You've been on you've been on this side longer. I think even just your introduction to the faith comes at a much more interesting perspective than average. But for me, like, Christianity was a culture, and within it, I was moral. But truth wasn't really, it was just a statement, like, Jesus is the truth. And it's like, you just believe that. Like, what do we mean by truth? What do we mean by Jesus?
That's like, yeah.
Like, all of those questions, to question those was to get a funny look. And it's like, and when that stops there, it's like you don't dig any deeper than that. And so, yeah.
That's why I think something that I am a firm believer of is like, and I think I could make this parallel. To me, it's like, if something is true, then you shouldn't, like, love shouldn't be an issue within a conversation when you're trying to communicate what you think is true and you providing your reason. Because if something's true, or even if you don't know the reason, it's like being willing or not afraid to seek it out, you know? Or like you said, if you say, oh, Jesus is the truth, and someone says, well, why do you believe that? And you're saying people would get looked at sideways for saying something like that, or like, how do we know the Bible's true? Or why do we do this as Christians? Or when you question like the norm, it's like people get offended or uncomfortable. And it's like, well, to me, my motto or my understanding is like, if something is true, then it doesn't matter how much you flop it. It's like, no matter how much you look, no matter if someone tried to implant evidence against it, it's like the truth of the situation did happen.
Yeah.
And is. So it should be able to be found. Right. So to me, it's like, that's no different than, and I like to use like an example that I think everybody can relate with, where it's like, oh, if someone came up to me right now, or if someone came up to you right now and they were like, Tim, you know, I know you thought it was the truth that your parents were your biological mother and father, but it's not the truth. It's not it.
Yeah.
For someone to be so like, what you mean? How you gonna tell me? It's like, whoa.
Right.
Like, if you're so sure, you should be able to present the most calm response to be like,
yeah.
You would almost laugh like, wait, where'd you get that from?
Right.
How did you come to that conclusion? And you already know, I got pictures. I can go look at my birth certificate. I can go do a blood test if I want tomorrow.
Right.
That it does exist.
Right.
I can go get tested and see, do I have the same blood as my mom and my dad? Like, knowing that you have that in your pocket to as a card to play, but you're so calm in that moment. But the minute someone's saying, well, you know, God doesn't exist, or Jesus didn't resurrect from the dead, or why do Christians do this, or Christians are wrong for this, or you're wrong for thinking this way, it's like we get offended or defensive. And it's like, if you really have a reason to know why you do what you do, you can maintain the love in the conversation about the truth of what you think, because you know that you can provide a reason. It's just the TLR. Right. It just works. I think I just, like, I love testing stuff, because it makes me think about like, when people will say like, oh, like I have stage fright, like I could never stand in front of a whole bunch of people and give a speech. Yeah. And to me, I'm like, I always ask this question, because people will tell me that, like, how do you like get on a stage and do a spoken word poem, or give a message, or like, aren't you nervous? Aren't you this? And to me, I always return the question back, like, do you think that you could stand in front, and I always build it in the way to where they already are thinking like, whatever Janae's finished saying, I'm about to say no. Right. And I'll be like, do you think you can be on a stage in front of all of America, cameras watching, everyone's tuned in, and you have to get on stage by yourself and tie your shoe, do the perfect shoe tie, and then walk off, and everyone would be like roaring and praising you. Like, if that was what you had to go up on stage and do, it's like you can do that. But it's because you're confident. I know how to tie my shoe. Right. So it's like, oh, so the stage fright's not the issue. You probably get on stage and get creative and be like, let me you might play a song as you walk out. Like, you might smile at the whole crowd and knowing I'm about to tie my shoe. Like, this is easy. I could do this. Like, but that just cancels out the fact that it's not that you have stage fright. You just don't know maybe your speech well. Right. Or maybe you're afraid. It's fear. Like, well, maybe with what you're talking about, you think somebody might be viewing that's going to give a rebuttal or an objection, or think what I said was I wasn't educated enough, or it's like all these fears come in, but with tying your shoe, you're going to kill it, walk off, and everyone's going to be proud of you. So I don't know. I just think like that matters, like when we don't know how to handle a certain situation, it's like, it's not because we don't, it's because we just probably don't know the answer. And that's why we come off that way in a conversation. Yeah. No, I think that's important to know what your values are before you step into the ring. Because that's the only thing that's weird about Christianity is it's an offensive faith. Like, you're going out, like you're talking about it. And yet, like, we don't have defenses, And so it's one of those things where it's just like, oh, well, if you go out talking about what you believe God has done, you should definitely have defenses for why you think that. Exactly. Like, and it's just one of those things that's weird. It's like, I don't know. It's like going in a boxing match only knowing how to punch. Like, you're just going to have a short career. Like, there's not really a way around it. Like, because even if you knock out your first two people who just don't know how to fight, you're going to attract a type of person that does. Exactly. And so at some point, if you're taking really it serious, like, the question is, what kind of believers do we want to be? Like, because, with what you just said, like, it's just funny that you use that exact example, because shameless plug with Sorry Not Sorry, that's literally the whole back cover write-up is exactly that concept with actual boxing, Oh, right. And so it's like me making that point to say, like, people are stepping in the ring and they're getting jacked up. And to me, it's like, that's the whole point of apologetics is like, let me equip you because you keep stepping in the ring. And it's like, why do you keep stepping in the ring if you don't know how to fight? Like you said, it's like people are thinking it's like, oh, I'm going to step in the ring and make this decision, and I'm going to try to play offense and try to swing. It's like, but you have no idea how to block. You don't know how to defend yourself. And you don't even know, like you said, you might only know how to punch. Or maybe you just imitating what you saw on TV from watching all these karate movies or boxing movies, and you're like, I can get in this ring and beat somebody up. Easy. And that's, I've said that many times to people where I'm like, or just even if we're talking, about our experiences, and it's like, why in the world would you why would somebody start a conversation about, I don't know, God's existence or abortion or any topic, just any topic. And it's like, but you're not equipped. Why did you speak? Right. Why did you start talking? It's like, why did you even put yourself in a position? Not that people shouldn't be able to share their opinions and their thoughts, but it's like, when you're dealing with like truth claims, if you want to just talk and say, I love watching this series or on Netflix, or I love doing this, or I love going to Disneyland, my kids, this or that. But the minute you say, and that's why the sun goes around the moon, you just made a truth statement. Right. You don't think people are going to check that? Like, so it's like, and you can't get mad especially if you on social media. Don't be out in the open. And then get mad. I think the mistake people make is there's nothing wrong with being a mother who doesn't know how to swim. Those two things aren't necessarily associated with each other. Like,
And then you find yourself one day, your kid ran into the water and you're like, oh my gosh. And then you jump in the water, you're panicking, you're half drowning, you're trying to get them out. You're trying to save somebody for a situation you weren't prepared for. That's one situation that happens. It's a whole nother thing to be a lifeguard. For that to actually be your job description. Then someone starts drowning and you, oh my God, now you jump in, you're half drowned. Now this looks sloppy and stupid.
Yeah, now like, you can receive judgment for that.
Right, for that. There's no empathy for that. A mother, definitely, it's like, oh, let's help her, let's figure out what's going on. And it's like, Christians claim to know the truth.
Exactly.
Like that's our job description. And then to jump in and say, yeah, but I don't really think I need to know how to defend the Bible. I think you should take God on faith. I think most people stay dead, but Jesus definitely didn't. He's the exception. What's the confusion?
I'm like, just for the record, it's like, it's not just Christians that are doing this. It's like, this is like a human character skill problem. I've seen atheists or Buddhists or a Muslim that's good in character, or, I mean, it could be a skill like, oh, they know how to play ping pong. A Christian can play ping pong. An atheist can play ping pong. It's like, that's because that's a human skill. It's kind of the whole truth claim thing. So it's going back to that when you're saying like Christians are making a truth claim. Like Christians are actually walking around saying we do have the truth. It's completely different if someone's walking around saying I just kind of go with the flow. I don't really know. I think this, I think that. But it's like when you're making truth claims, and then that was the point I'm trying to make is like Christians aren't the only ones around making truth claims. You know, because it's like, yeah, we are making a truth claim. And I think people think, oh, religious people walk around claiming to know the truth and they're making truth claims. And I'm like, no, I know a lot of non-religious people too who are making many truth claims on a variety of different levels. They're making truth claims about there is no life after death. That's a truth claim. Or are you saying we can't know? That's different. But that's what you still believe though. You still think it's true that we can't know. It's like, that's what you think. Or when it comes to how to raise your kids, should you let your child date at age 15, 13? You make them wait until they're 18 and out the house. It's like people are still making truth claims about different stuff, what they think about politics and the president or who should be in office or something. So, I mean, so many different topics where people are walking around with a worldview, you know, and it's like the issue to me is when someone doesn't know how to back up their thought about something or their belief in something, whether they're Christian or not, I think that's just a skill issue. Like it's a human problem.
I don't know who says this. And this is like, I didn't realize how deep this reigns because when we have this conversation, like some defenses are like, you can't convince someone into the faith. Like, and it's just like, it's definitely not in scripture. In fact, the opposite's constantly in scripture, debating, reasoning, actually convincing, like the one that's just straight up there, apologia, as you will point out often. And it's just like, you have all these times where people are being reasoned into the faith. And it's like, and the reason was good. And it's like, so to say, people don't get reasoned into the faith. I think this is the most egregious thing when we're talking about, like, it's not about
I don't even know where that statement came from. And that's the problem is like, that's a very popular statement.
Yeah.
How in the world?
It's because people are thinking like, oh, like people will respond to love, not truth. And it's like, or facts. And it's like, I almost get the sentiment because they're saying like, basically when someone's like, I don't know, someone passes away and then someone comes with the truth. And it's like, hey man, the fact is your significant other is dead. You need to move on. You got work in the morning. It's like, that's a truth. And then it's like, that won't be as valuable as a person who says, man, I'm really sorry for your loss. Hey, like, I'm here for you, whatever you need, like X, Y, Z. It's like, that's, I think they're separating them in that respect. And it's like, so they're saying people don't come into the faith because of truth. They come, or facts. They come in because of love. And it's like, to me, it's like, it's a completely like irrelevant comparison. But that I think that is the misconception though. But it's like, love is grounded in truth. Like, if God is love, then love is motivated by the same thing, truth. It's all coming from the fact that God is real.
Yeah, but I think that's why you can't separate them,
Yeah.
but we choose to. But I think it's because of our own selves getting in the way, because there are some people that they don't know how to do like the love and the truth part. But they just keep on giving all these reasons for what they think. And they're not worried about their conduct or character, how their tone in a conversation. They're not worried about making truth statements as they talk. They're just like, well, no, because the reason why I did this was because I went here and did and they just keep giving all these reasons. And it's like, but are your reasons rooted in truth? Some people just care about truth. And they're like, well, no, I just know it's true that God exists, or I know it's true that these are my parents.
Yeah.
And it's like they're now treating the person that's challenging that claim, that's saying those are not your parents, they're getting defensive and mad and belittling them, maybe saying like, how the heck are you going to say, and cussing, and and it's like, and they don't know how to give a reason for why they think these are their parents, because that would be simple if they could just say, oh, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, I can give the evidence and my reason for why I think why I know they're my parents. Like, so I just think like what you were saying, I think you were leaning on like love, like, oh, it's just easier to give love and compassion rather than having to back it up with a reason or truth. And I think that's true for the person that's emotional or focused on just love only. Yeah. Then it's like the person only focused on reason is lacking in the other two, and the person focused on truth is lacking in the other two.
Yeah,
it's it goes, they all interchange with each other.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a trinity.
Yeah, literally.
Because it's like, like losing any one of those things is super costly. Being right and not knowing why is almost as dangerous. I'd say it's probably more dangerous than being wrong and having a good reason, because the person who's wrong and has a good reason can be convinced of something
exactly
else. The person that thinks they're right and doesn't have a reason, that means they've been believing something with no evidence, which means evidence also won't do much.
It doesn't matter. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like it's never been about truth.
Yeah, and I want to tie it back to Jesus because of the fact that I think a lot of people, when they say like, oh, like what you brought up earlier, like people being convinced into the faith. And even that phrasing to me is like, I know everyone gets what we mean. Like, I get it. But it's just one of those things where it's like, if we really dissect it, it's like faith means to trust and confidence. So it's like trying to convince someone to be confident about something.
Yeah.
How can you make someone confident about something without giving them reasons to trust someone or to be confident? Like, that's what that word means. Right. So it's like when we say, like, oh, we have faith in God. Do you have faith in Jesus Christ? It's like, do you have confidence in God? Do you trust God? Well, why in the world would you trust God or have confidence if you don't have a reason to? Like, no Christian on this planet doesn't have a reason for why they are claiming to trust God and be confident. Whether even if it's, well, my grandma said I could trust God. Right. My grandma said I should trust God. I should have faith. Right. It's like, but until you understand it for yourself and genuinely trust God for yourself and have faith for yourself, it's like you have to have your own reason. And I think that's, depending on what your reason is, I think it's when it's held up to scrutiny or an objection, it's like, or a life situation, like you lose a loved one, it's like, if your faith was rooted in, my grandma said I should have faith in God, and my grandma said I should trust that God created everything and that God exists and yada yada, or the pastor said, it's like the minute you get hit with a big life event, it's going to be like, oh, well, maybe I can't trust God. Maybe I can't. Maybe my grandma was wrong. Right. Maybe the pastor, but if that was the extent of your reason, it's like, well, then of course, when people say like, oh, it's like, we shouldn't have to convince people into the faith or persuade people into the faith or debate about God, argue about God, provide reasons for why we think what we think is true. It's like, no, that is an act of love, because God gave multiple reasons.
Yeah.
Like throughout the Old Testament, for one, all the ways he came through, it's like he's giving reasons how he shows up. And I think it's just funny. That's how he develops his names. Yeah. Like Jehovah Jireh, my provider, Jehovah Raphi, healer. It's
they
like,
didn't call him a provider first. It's like, no, they got manna first.
Yes. It's like they saw a healing take place and said Jehovah Raphi. Yeah. It's like my healer, my the creator. Mm-hmm. It's like the concept of like none of this was made by human hands. Like God is the power of God. Like he's in control of everything. It's like he's giving, when he can control things right in front of you, and it's like he is in control of everything. Like when they said about Jesus, like the whole famous story about the Jesus stopping the storm, peace be still. It's like they said, wow, who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him? He gave them a reason. It's like, you believe that I am in control of creation as a transcendent creator because I gave you a reason to think so.
Right.
And it's like,
just thought that on my own. Yeah,
exactly. It's like the resurrection. It's like, that was to me one of the biggest reasons for them to continue to trust him after he died, is he resurrected. And it's like, that's a huge reason to trust somebody. If they said, I'm going to get up in 3 days, and they actually do.
I'm realizing the issue with apologetics and just the people who are contending with the faith and the people who are going to church every Sunday. Like, it's like, I think the gap is the same issue you have with like sports. It's so easy to watch a pro athlete that might be like, you know, maybe not a superstar, he's just on the court and you're watching him play, and then to think he's not that good. Like, and it's like, you didn't realize, like Steph Curry, someone I thought a crazy athlete, not even crazy athlete, not the point. The point is, I thought he was short because he's playing with these trees, you know, 7 foot something on the court. And then it's like, you get up next to the dude and it's like, he's 6'4". That's a tall dude. It's like, but you didn't know that because you're not in that ring.
Right.
And it's like, I remember you put me on this, and I was so glad you did it, because when I was trying to figure out I'm trying to figure out what other arguments are out there, because they can't be that bad. And so I'm like, listen to Delahunty, see what's up. It was just funny because I remember listening to the first thing. I was like, I mean, this is dumb. It seems so obvious. It's like, and this guy is killing him, basically, the Christian in the debate or whatever. And then you were like, okay. I mean, if it's that simple, then start pausing the video.
And you respond.
After Delahunty makes his point, respond, pause. And it was just funny because I'd hit pause and I'd be in there for like 5 minutes. I was like, shoot. I'm like, it's one thing to agree with someone who's done the work. It's another thing to know how to do the work. Like, you don't just get to say, yeah, the math teacher knew the answer. It's like, you got to take this test at the end. It's like, if you for real met someone who didn't get the same answer, you'd have to contend for that. If I go down during peace times at a gun range and I'm shooting, and then it's like my gun jams and I reload, I get it right, but I don't fix it quick enough, as quick as I know I can. And now I'm frustrated. I might throw my gun down and actually be mad for the day. And someone else is like, dude, calm down. Like, what is the big deal that we're just at a gun range shooting cans off the wall and you got mad? And it's like, if the only experience I had was at a gun range casually shooting with friends, that would make sense. I'd also be very disturbed. But if I've been down range and my gun is jammed before, and because I didn't get it loaded quick enough, my teammate got shot, it's like, now all of a sudden I'm like, dude, this mistake has cost someone their life before. And I missed it again. Like, you see the frustration of having holes in your defense. And it's like, that's what it feels like sometimes. Is you're trying to make an argument for why this is so frustrating to a bunch of people who haven't seen war before. And it's like, they haven't had to contend. They haven't had to fight. They haven't been in these conversations that have cost you. And it's like, how do you communicate to a person that only knows peace? Yeah, that you can't afford to make these mistakes. Like,
it makes me think about, to vamp on that exact analogy, it makes me think about like people playing like a video game. It's like Call of Duty versus real war. It's almost like when people are used to just playing Call of Duty, they're like, oh, when I get shot, it just starts over. New life, brand new. I get to try it again. And it's like, yeah, that's cute when you raise your hand in Bible study and say, wait, so what was this? And the Bible study teacher in a nice safe room says, this is the answer for this, or this is what you should do for this. And all the advice is helpful and good, and it's just good. But it's like, you can't always get your questions answered all of a sudden when you're, in the heat of the moment and a coworker asks you a question, or someone comes to you, and whether it's a deep theological question and they're on the verge of like committing suicide because they're like, God is not a good God.
Right.
because of the problem of evil and suffering in the world.
Right.
And you're not equipped to answer that question.
Right.
And then if you don't answer it properly, or you struggle through it, and then you see that person walk away, and then you never hear from them again, or they actually took their life. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's a different weight.
Right.
Compared to but you're in the ring at that point. You're in the game at that point. And I think everyone talks about this, like, especially just within the church and Christian spaces. It's like, okay, we know in America, for the most part, people aren't really going through nothing. I mean, for their faith, not in life. Yeah. Just when it comes to standing firm for their faith, like, that's not really happening like that. So I think everyone's playing Call of Duty, and they see a simulation of the war and what it looks like, and that equivalent to me would be like sermons and Bible stories, and they're just like, man, like, look at Paul and them defending their faith, they're just preaching the gospel, doing this. And it's like, yeah, but what are you doing in your day-to-day? It's like, when you take this to real life and then you stand firm, even with yourself, it's like, oh, Paul's, I do what I don't want to do, and sometimes I do it's like, well, how are you with that I do what I don't want to do with pornography, or your eating habits, or your tone, or when you get an attitude? Like, what's your self-control look like for real with people and your disciplines? Like, it's two different things.
That's what it is. You just put words to something that it's been mulling in the back of my mind, but it's like,
it's been mulling.
Right.
No, never heard that word in my life.
Mulling.
It's been
moldering. I don't know. But I'm like, it's the idea that, like, I don't know if you've seen, I feel like it's a bit that goes around on TikTok or whatever, but it's just like, back in my day, we used to play video games. And now kids, like, they
explain it, because you told me this.
Yeah, like, they watch people play video games. Mm-hmm. Like, they don't actually play, they watch people play video games. And then it, like, went extreme. It's like watching people play video games. But it's like, it's funny, but it's like, I think when you're in peacetime, that is kind of what you end up doing, is you end up watching people who did this Christian thing. It's like, that's what Bible studies are now. It's
literally.
Like, no one's actually doing it. It's like, we show up on Wednesdays or Sundays to get to hear about a person who actually did the thing.
Right.
And it's like, and then we go back about our days as best we can, but it's like, man, imagine the kind of faith, imagine the kind of reason Stephen had to have stones ready being thrown at him, and they couldn't withstand his wisdom. And it's like, we'll almost write him off as something other than what we are. Like, that was a different era. He had a different Holy Spirit.
Like, we admire it so much, as if that's not what, I mean, even for, like, my story, it's like, this, people still doing it to this day. Like,
yeah, and it's like, and I think what's interesting is, like, that we don't realize the reason we're not getting the opportunities is because we don't know how to. In my perception of what I've seen, I think a lot of Christians, or just Christianity in general, I don't think we agree on our doctrines. I think we agree on our heresies. Like, it's like, no one's willing to say how much alcohol is sin, but they will agree on that's too much. That's excessive. Right. Like, it's like, when something goes outside of the agreed parameters, everyone will point at it, but we don't actually have a core belief. Like, and it's so funny, because I've been watching it from the atheist perspective now, and watching Christians respond, and the answer is always, oh, well, if you thought that, then that's not real Christianity. It's like, oh, if you thought sprinkle baptism was part of, that's not real Christianity. Or full submersion, that's not real Christianity. Or the next person says, if you thought baptism saves you, that's not real Christian. Like, there's no centralized, like, idea of what we're talking about. And it's like, and so we think we're on the same page because we wear the same name tag and get mad at the same outliers. But we don't actually have something in the middle that we're saying, this is Christianity, this is how we move. Like, it doesn't move like anything else. Like, in a football team, it's like, hey, this is our identity as a team. We run the spread, our defense is the nickel, we do this and that. Like, this is how we play the game. This is our identity. Their identity is something else, clearly identifiable. And it's like, Christianity, it's like, Christ crucified, God exists, Jesus rose from the dead, like, believe and be saved. And it's like, after these things, there's a whole bunch of things that we care about a whole lot.
Right.
But we won't call them these things.
Right.
But they still are. It's like I don't even understand the concept, to be real. I don't understand the concept of primary, secondary, and tertiary issues. Like primary.
I'm curious what you're going to say because
You think so?
Yeah, but okay. I mean,
because I think primary issues are salvation. It's God doesn't exist, but I'm a Christian. It's like interesting. Let's talk about it. But that's definitely not Christianity.
You said God doesn't exist, but I'm a Christian.
But I'm a Christian. I'm like, that's a primary issue, right? For someone to say that.
Well, I was like, the sentence doesn't make sense.
Oh, right. Exactly. That's your point. That's my point. My point is to think that is a completely different issue. But then you get into something like a secondary issue. And that's what I don't understand. Because this is not primary, which means to me it's not primary. Like that is it. I don't know what it means to have something beyond that. Like this is Christianity. So there's stuff that's like this is your preference.
This is one of those soccer football things.
Okay.
Situations, like at least from if I have what you're saying right. I think what people mean when they say, at least my understanding of like the primary and the secondary thing is like, oh, primary is the essentials.
Yes. Secondary
could just be truth statements. It has nothing to do with it being essential. Like if somebody to their grave thinks that Jesus was a white man, and they just were told that, they thought it was true.
Right.
It's like that isn't affecting nothing.
Right.
It's not the truth.
Right.
It's like that's just like a secondary topic. It's like you would want to get that right. But even if it's more deeper, if it's like, oh, like I don't know, like should you sleep with somebody? Should you be having sex? Like even, if your wedding day is in 2 days. Mm-hmm. And the fact that, this is something Christians for real debate. It's like, no, you got to wait until the actual I do's at the altar. Or some Christians might be like, no, you guys have already made a commitment to each other. It's like, it's not that deep. Right. Like God's covenant isn't activated on marriage day. Like, right. It's like, so to me, it's one of those things where it's like, are we talking about salvation? There's salvation in that moment. But somebody might be like, no, but I think that's not right though, because. So anyways, I think all of those kind of topics of like, are we handling this in wisdom? Yeah. Or is this accurate to just the truth statements that Jesus made or who he is or, but not on like the primary stuff. Is that what you're talking about or is it different?
I guess, because then you get to the tertiary or the third tier. It's like, I think there's a confusion that's happening in Christianity. It's like there's primary issues and there's secondary issues. And then there's, within secondary issues, the question is it true or not? Mm-hmm. Did Jesus say to get baptized in milk or did Jesus say to get baptized in water? Like, that's a completely different question from, is baptism a primary issue? Like, is being baptized in water a salvation issue? If you love Jesus, understand God, and fail to get in a pool of water, are you not a Christian yet? Like,
yeah.
And it's like, those are two different things to me. Like, what did Jesus say? And then is it primary or secondary? And I think that's the issue that, like, I don't think we agree. I don't think if you sat down a bunch of Christians and said, what are our primary issues? Like, I don't think we'd get the same thing. I think there'd be plenty of people that say, like, hey, like.
At least not initially. I said initially.
Man, that's a word.
Initially. God, I ain't never said that in my life. That's hilarious.
I never heard
it in my life. But I was thinking, like, initially, no. I don't think people are going to, like, bring secondary issues into primary issues. Like, I think Christians would say, like, oh, yeah, like, when it comes to, God existing and the infallible word of scripture, Jesus' deity, the resurrection, I think they would be like, yeah, that's, by grace through faith alone. Like, they'll quote that. Mm-hmm. Then the minute I think secondary topics come up,
right,
here comes the switch up. Now it's the tying of, it's that whole thing we've talked about so many times, that whole thing about like, and that needs to be a conversation all by itself, because it's like when you have like the essentials and then you have like random topics, secondary, we would say like baptism and all that. And then it's like, well, like you just said, if a person doesn't get baptized though, if a person does believe that they can sleep with their girlfriend or their boyfriend,
Right.
if a person does think that they don't have to, whatever the topic is,
Right.
it's like we would argue, or not me and you, but I think the main view in Christian thinking, I think they would argue like, well, if a person is not doing something correctly, that I think is of God or a work.
Yeah.
So it's like the faith is the justification and primary issues, and then works would be in the secondary issues, baptism being a work or whatever. It's like we would say if a person continues in a work that I think is not a good work, that can then affect the primary. And that's how secondary issues become primary, because of that whole statement. It's the
Yes.
evidence that a person, that is the evidence
Yeah,
that a
no one
person
goes
does
on
not
sinning.
believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole scripture.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the line gets drawn. And it's like, that is a conversation that needs to get had.
This is something that you need if you believe anything about anything, and talking to someone that exists.
If you plan to open your mouth.
Oh, for real. I'm just like, listen, if you have the audacity to think something, then this matters.
I get it. It's one of those things where it's like unfortunate that we have to play so sensitive with the church. Like if you're a freak of an athlete or just a good coach or a good teacher, a good dentist, a good doctor, whatever you do, it's like, and you go somewhere else and see it done poorly.
Right.
I feel like I can't point that out. I shouldn't say, or even if you don't say it, but even to think it, even to feel like, or to recognize it, and I think like, it's just unfortunate that with the church, it's like, it's so sensitive. And to me, it's like, I think Christians need tough love, because I'm like, Jesus definitely did not show that kind of mercy, not when it came to what was true, or when it came to like how people thought and how he handled the different scenarios. Like he was very cutthroat and honest about, so I don't know. I just think it's a tough love thing. I think Christians need that tough love. It's not us being frustrated. Like, what is frustrating, but it's not an act of like hate or trying to condemn people or, like a judgment with a negative motive. It's like, no, in order for people to learn, sometimes it's like, okay, you big and bad. You think you big and bad as a fighter, and you sitting here talking all this stuff on your campus at school. Let's say it was like a high schooler. Mm-hmm. It's like, or a middle schooler that's the bully. It's like, you know what? Let's take you to a boxing ring.
Right.
But let's get you humbled a little bit, like to see that you don't know what you're talking about. And I think sometimes that reality can actually ignite someone to be like, I don't want that to ever happen again. Either they're going to be embarrassed and they're going to leave and never come back, or they're going to train. Exactly.
I think the issue is with the church specifically is that it's become, not all churches either, but it's the fact that it's become its own entity, its own building, like kind of disconnected from society in a lot of ways. And so it's like when you're coming to service, I get the same impression I do when I'm coming to someone else's house. You know what I mean? And it's like, when you come into another person's house, it's like that's how they run their house. Maybe they don't clean. Maybe they don't clean the toilet. Maybe they don't, they leave a mess and you notice it. But it's like, because this isn't my house and they invited me in, it's like, how much can I say in someone else's territory? Like that becomes the feeling. And because the outside issues aren't in the church or being addressed there, it's like you feel like you're bringing up something that doesn't pertain in a lot of ways. It's like, oh no, this isn't, like some people would just say that. It's like, oh, this isn't in my church. It's like, that's like a legitimate defense. And it's like, two things are either true. Either one, you've done such a bad job that it's truly not in your church, because you should have some problems in your church.
Right.
You've kept them out. That's its own problem. Or two, you've silenced them. They don't feel like they can talk here because it's not, and so it's like
no one has doubts here at my church.
Yeah, it's like
nobody has a single doubt about anything.
Yeah, my understanding of the normal layout is people don't believe, then they come to the church and get baptized, and it's like, so these are still people that, you know, like have varying degrees of understanding of just Christianity, and it's like all of these people have an understanding of the gospel, Jesus, resurrection, the Bible, all of these things. It's like I don't understand that. So it's like, I know they're not there. And I haven't seen like a lot of places doing like an apologetic, like, hey, this is why this is true. Like, I just don't see that layout.
Yeah, but you know what it is? Like, I think that because it would have to come from the top down. It'd be one thing. God, okay, I have two thoughts. I hope I don't lose them. They're connected. It's like, I think they're two different issues. It's like a parent who doesn't teach their child why they should take the trash out. They just say, do it because I said so. That's unfortunate, because it's like, if that's how you raise your kid, you just always give them rules and laws and chores to follow, and you never give them a reason. It's like, don't ask me why, go do XYZ. Go get this, go get that. It's like, but you never provide the reason. It's like, it's unfortunate because the parent knows the reason.
Right.
In that scenario,
yes.
The parent is thinking, I need this trash out of my house.
Right.
It stinks. It's gonna make, dirty. It's just dirty.
Yeah.
It's got to go out for health reasons at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the other type of scenario where the adult don't know either.
Right.
And they're also not giving a reason. So it's like, to me, those are two different scenarios, to where if the kid don't know why we're taking the trash out and the adult is sitting there like, well, I don't know the reason why I do this. Like, at least on a deep level, to me, it's like, yeah, I guess, just it gets full, so you take it out. It's like, no, this can smell up the house. Like, this can attract critters and creatures. Mm-hmm. This can keep getting into the air and you can breathe that in. Like, there could be seafood in there or something, whatever, that can mildew, mold. Like, this can happen. Right. It's like, now you're probably gonna get maggots and flies, and it's like, that would be the reason. But if you don't know that answer, it would make sense why you wouldn't pass an answer down.
Yeah.
Compared to the parent who knows why, but they just don't feel the need to explain it. And I think with the church, a lot of the times it's like, I think both happen. I think there's some people who've gone to seminary and, certain pastors, leadership, where they know reasons behind stuff. Then maybe they feel like the congregation's too immature, they're too young. Yeah. They don't really, it's just going to have to be a because I said so kind of thing. I'm just going to have to teach in such a way to where I'm not giving all the details and the deep reasons. Then there's leaders that they don't know the answer for themselves, and so they're not giving it to the congregation either. I think for the leaders who don't know for themselves, it's just unfortunate, because I think how they view the Bible being true, or those kind of claims, Jesus did resurrect from the dead, God does exist. I think they see those claims no different than the stuff we're guilty of every day. I use my phone. I don't know how to build a phone.
Right.
I don't know how, when I touch this button and swipe this way and click on Instagram it's just opening stuff. Like, I don't know the software and all the technical stuff behind it. Or coffee. I put the pod in the Keurig or whatever. I make my coffee or whatever. It's like, I don't know how that works. I use the microwave. I don't know how electricity works. Right. But it's like, I would make a claim though and say, walk around confident, being like, so when you're making popcorn, you want to make sure you put it in the microwave. Don't put it in the oven.
Right.
Talking confident.
Right.
Or I'll say, no, if you're going to do that, you want to get a little crisp, like put on the broiler. Right. Like, do that. But if somebody was to be like, yeah, well, I don't think we should use the microwave because of just, I heard it wasn't healthy. It's like radiation. It's like, what you mean? Like, I've warmed up vegetables in my microwave. I've done this. I don't understand radiation. Right. It's like, I don't know any deeper reasons for my beliefs with using a microwave, or why should you use the oven or an air fryer and not it. But if somebody comes and says, oh, I don't put food in microwaves because of the radiation, they did their research.
Right.
They know why they're not using it or whatever, you know. And I think we do that, or a lot of Christians are doing that with these types of claims. And so they're just telling people no different than they would tell them to put the food in the microwave, even if they don't understand how it works. It's like, oh, put your faith in Jesus.
Yeah.
But like, why though? Why wouldn't I put my faith in Allah?
Right.
Well, because Jesus is the truth.
Right.
It's like the microwave warms up your food. It's like, yeah, but what if that's actually dangerous though? Like the radiation could be dangerous. What if putting my faith in Jesus, like, what if he never got up and rose from the dead? It's like, well, no, that's not true. He did rise from the dead. Right. That's no different than saying, no, radiation. What you talking about? No, you just throw it in the food and push the button, press start. Right. It's like they don't know. And that's honestly, it's like they're not at fault. Like they don't know.
I think that's what it is too, is we don't think we have to contend with what our modern day contenders are. Yeah. In the Bible, it's like Paul is arguing with Stoics. He's arguing with Jews, and he understood them. Like he sat and understood Stoicism and other Greek and Greco-Roman philosophies. And then, and then he was already a Jew, but it's like you sit down and understand who you're contending with. But today it's like, we feel like science, that's too something. Like it's like it takes too much energy to get into it. And it's like, this is the contender. Like we're in America, like atheism and like creationism and evolutionary. It's like these are the things that surround your kingdom. And it's like you're not going to get informed on the things that are most likely to contend for your children, church, youth, and everything else. Like, what else are you looking into? It's like thinking, nah, I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to watch film on the other team because I'm so confident in my playbook that they can't stop me. It's like, there's no other place in the world where that sentence makes any sense. Yeah. At all. It's like, I'm going to start a new company, but I'm not going to look into the companies that have already existed, that already are on my brand, because mine is the best. It's like,
well, see, you can die with that, or you could not even die with that. You could believe that, and I think belief alone, that would work. If you just believed you had the best plays and you never checked, it's like you could have been the best.
That's what I'm saying. It's like to not watch film is one thing, but to know you're going to play the team at the end of the week you didn't watch film, it's like that's crazy. Or it's like, I'm going to make a new burger company and I'm going to plant it right between In-N-Out and Whataburger.
Chick-fil-A, please.
I'm going to put it between two restaurants that matter, and I'm not going to anticipate them at all. Like, they're going to take my customers. They're going to do things. They might absorb my philosophy, but my stuff can get off the ground because I didn't do it. It's like, there's so many errors that come with the fact that we're just not going to look into what other people are talking about because it's not us.
Yeah, and I think at the foundation of all of that is love. Like, we see that in like so many proverbs, you know, where it's like, oh, like, where it's highlighting to listen. It's like listening, and we know what it means to love somebody. It's like if you love somebody, then you have to know who they are to love them. Like you gotta listen to them. You gotta if you just want to talk and all the little proverbs that be talking about, I don't remember exactly what they say, but it's getting on the people that just talk. You're not listening. Yeah, it's like slow down. Like be quiet. Like don't just talk to hear yourself, or you only care about what you think. It's like, listen to somebody else, like understand what their world is. And it's just, you know, as an ex-therapist, it's like, I use this example all the time where it's like, yeah, you can't sit there in your initial session with the client when you're doing the intake. Like you don't sit there and try to start giving them interventions and skills after you don't know nothing. It's like, you don't start doing that until about a week, maybe 5, 6. It's like, now, okay, we're going to implement this intervention. Like, we're going to do this. Like, but you heard their story first and you know where they are, and now you can present the information. And I think going back to just the whole TLR, it's like, if you think something's true, the loving thing to do if someone else doesn't think what you think is true is true. The most loving thing to do to me would be to actually figure out what do they think is true.
Yeah.
Troubleshoot, brainstorm, navigate it. Be like, they think it's true that this is this. I think it's true that this is this. Clearly, these are two different answers. Yeah. It's almost like it's just critical thinking. It's like, how did they get there? If we're talking about the same topic, right. It's like, how did they end up calling this cloth yellow when it's black? Yeah. What do they mean when they say yellow? Maybe I need to think, what other objects in the room? Do they think bananas are black then?
Right.
What else is yellow? Let me ask them that question. Let me ask them define yellow. Because once you understand them, you can then bridge and you can give your reason, understand their reason to get to the truth of the matter and do it in a loving way, because that is the most loving thing to do, rather than being like, oh, well, I don't know why they think it's yellow. Whatever, that ain't my problem. Whatever.
You know what? I need to say this now, get it out the way so that I just know. All right. There's certain stuff I say all the time. And I'm just like, this is one of them. But it's like knowing where America ends and Christianity begins. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's like, because I think sometimes we can't draw the line between where our culture is and where our beliefs, our core beliefs are. And I feel like when you don't listen, you end up strangling out things that are culture.
Yeah.
Contending that they're beliefs. And it's just like, that's a huge deal, because I'm just like, I don't know. It's just when I think about going place to place or culture, it's like when you understand somebody, it's like, it's like if I'm talking to a Muslim, there's certain things I don't have to work with already. We already agree that there's a God and that he's good. Mm-hmm. We need to contend about something else. So it's like, right. But if you don't do that, if you don't make that distinction, it's like you'll wreck something you agree with. And it's just such a damaging habit to think like every time. It would be like being a trainer, but you only know how to train from scratch. Mm-hmm. Like you can't assess where someone is and then build from there.
So
it's
annoying.
Like a college athlete that's not pro comes in and it's like, all right, today we're going to work on dribbling.
Hold on. Sorry, go ahead.
But I'm just like, how irritating would that be for the college athlete? He might leave just out of the frustration. Not that you couldn't have taught him something, but that you taught him 90% of something he already knew. And it's like, and then there's people who don't know anything. And it's like, okay, cool. Now we start. But it's like, if you're not going to assess where people are and where those agreeing points are, then you're going to lose people, not because you were wrong, but because you didn't know they were right about some things that you weren't willing to listen to first. And I don't know.
I wanted to.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to bring this up because the exact point that you're making, I feel like we've talked about this, where when you're in a conversation with somebody and then they say like they're excited to tell you a story, and you'd be like, oh yeah, you told me that, or I heard that, and they got to start from the beginning anyway.
Yeah,
it's like you were trying to make a point, but you wanted to tell a story to get to your point, and I'm like, yeah, you told me that story already, and they're like, yeah, and because so what happened was, because when I was at the store and then I asked the lady, like, I need my $5 change, and I'm like,
you know what's bad?
We went through this whole story. I just said we've talked about this. That's no different than you saying the pro athlete or whatever already knows how to dribble. Like, why are we starting from the beginning?
It's like we've already been there. And the worst part is, because you know how you try to save yourself in those conversations by like finishing the sentence? It's like, yeah, and then we went on the roller coaster. Like, right, because after that I saw Johnny and he was at the movies with you. It's like, so you already see. It's like, that's what you're trying to get so that we can talk about the thing.
Then they're going to finish the full story and then be like, yeah, I know I told you that already, but you just said it again.
Yeah, you said it all. And it's like, you used up my stamina for something,
right?
And now it's like I only got 10 miles in the tank left now. Right. You took me 15 on something we already knew,
right?
So now you can't. Yeah, it's like
why not? But what's fun? I know that's like funny, but it's like what's crazy about that is it is a perfect example for what we're talking about, because it's like a person who just wants to hear themselves talk. You're doing that for you. Right. There's no way, if you really believe that this person, and you're thinking about this person, and you really believe what they're saying when they say, oh, you told me this already.
Yeah.
It's like, in your mind, if it was about them,
Yeah.
you'd be thinking, they heard this already.
Yeah.
So let me start here.
Yes.
But if it's about you and you're just excited to tell the story, or you just want to get it out again, or you just, whatever the reason is, it's like, regardless of what the reason is, you're doing it for yourself because they just told you told me this already, or they just told you, I already know how to dribble.
Right.
And look, I can show you.
I can show you. I can demonstrate.
Yeah, it's one thing where the person's like, nah, you think I've told you this story, but I remember telling you, and I know I left out some parts. So let me actually fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
But didn't say that.
That's like a huge deal, because I'm like, if you're not going to assess where people are at, then don't be surprised when they don't want to talk about wherever they meant to go. Like, because that's what it is. It's like, dude, like, we keep sitting in this, like, I don't know, like this 3-foot pool of water. And I keep telling you, like, I'm a lifeguard who jumps out of helicopters to save people. Like, I can swim, bro. Like, it's like,
and you're putting, as they slide, floaties up your arm. And they're like, yeah, but this is what the paper says, the curriculum says I'm supposed to start here. So I feel you.
Yeah, so I just think that's like a huge deal, even outside of the Christian camp is, and I love, what's his name? Cosmic Skeptic, O'Connor. Because it's like, he kind of, he can explain Christianity better than most Christians.
Oh, yeah.
Easy. Not just Christianity either, most religions. It's like he's done his legwork. So to say, oh, he's not a Christian, he must not have, like, for these people to sit down with Alex O'Connor and just go, oh, well, if you're not a believer, you must not, like, trust in Jesus or believe in the right. It's just like,
or you can recommend you need to read the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, have you read it cover to cover? It's like, man, I've read it in reverse, actually. Like, I have the books backwards. I've read in reverse. Yes. When a person isn't able to listen deeply, it also might prove that they're trying to stay where they can swim. It's not actually a shot on you. Like, if you were an expert and I was trying to teach you, and you're like, yeah, so what I'm trying to figure out about physics is, and it's like, oh yeah, physics. Like, so what you need to know about physics is that, first of all, it's dealing with, a lot of math, a lot of geometry, and it's like, the only reason I cut you off is because you were already hitting my ceiling. I don't understand physics that well. And so in order to talk with you, I have to keep the conversation here.
Right.
So it's not actually that I'm trying to so much convince you as I'm trying not to expose what I don't know.
Right.
But if I let you keep talking and you're like, yeah, so my question within physics is how gravity works. Is gravity a thing? Time, space. It's like you start doing that and now you're like, so anyway, that's what my question was. Now, because I've let you finish your sentence, the only thing I can say is, man, listen, I'm a fraud. This name tag. It's like, that's what you'd have to do if you let a person finish, so you stop them from talking. And I think, obviously that turns into a character issue, but it's like, outside of the character problem of just saying, hey, I don't know, outside of my pay grade, I know someone who does know. It's like, it's also just helpful to say, dang, okay, I didn't know the answer to that. Now, why do I think what I think? Or what, it's like to take that blow on the chin and then say, and I think that's what it is the blows on the chin are so accessible because you have YouTube and podcasts. Like, there's, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many places that can knock you out without even having to be publicly shamed. Just go listen to somebody that makes more sense than you. Like, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's just, those are the kind of things that should at least start getting you thirsty. Is like, this is what's out there. And we need to be able to contend with the best of them, not just the rest of them.
I agree 100%. So, yeah, I mean, I think with everything we talked about and even how you landed that, I think going back to TLR, I think that is like to bring it home.
Right.
I think like the entire point and the reason why this matters is because in order to love people in this world, taking it back to what Jesus said, is like, love your neighbor as yourself. It's like we're doing life with people on this planet. We want to know what the truth is about any and everything. And we're claiming to have the truth as Christians and all of that. I think this is almost like the roadmap, like to get there, you know, and it's like, this is what should be at the core of what we're doing, and at the foundation of everything that we're doing in life is like loving our neighbor, loving ourselves, loving our neighbor, loving God, right. And reasoning, knowing how to articulate ourselves with one another and trying to all get to the truth. Right. And so I think, like that's the only way that we can, I think as far as our philosophy, we would say is this is the roadmap. Like that's how we would accomplish that task. Like even the Great Commission, like go spread the gospel, the good news about Jesus Christ. It's like, well, as an attempt to do that, or in an attempt to do that, it's like, you know, we want to operate in truth when it comes to what we're spreading. Right. We want to love our neighbors. You know, we want to be able to reason with them as just a basic human skill. Yeah. You know, so I think like, I think that's why that's a good philosophy, just to help us navigate this life. So,
what we say? Bye.
You want to close it?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So that's the podcast is over.
Peace, chicken grease, cornrows, and afros.
Bye.